Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban launched a vehement critique against the United States, NATO, and the European Union, warning that cutting off Russian energy imports would cripple Hungary's economy. In a combative radio interview, Orban revealed that he personally told U.S. President Donald Trump that an immediate end to import of Russian oil and gas would slash Hungary's gross domestic product by 4% and devastate household finances. He accused Brussels and NATO of forcing Hungary toward a war logic that contradicts its national interests and blamed the conflict in Ukraine for pushing Europe into a broader crisis. In a significant domestic policy announcement, Orban declared that his government would classify the anti-fascist movement Antifa as a terrorist organization under a new national list, a move aligning with his government's long-standing stance against left-wing activism. The comments underscored the deep political divisions within NATO and the EU regarding how to confront Russia, with Hungary consistently opposing sanctions that target Russian energy sectors and arguing for a negotiated peace that prioritizes European economy stability. The tensions were further amplified at the international level when Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused NATO and the EU of using Ukraine to wage a real war against Moscow. Lavrov made the remark during a G20 foreign ministers meeting at the United Nations, stating that the West had provoked the crisis in Ukraine as a means to engage in a direct confrontation with Russia. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper immediately countered Lavrov's accusation, dismissing them as false fantasy world distortion and reaffirming that Russia is solely responsible for its unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. Europe's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, added that there are no signs Russia's goal of subjugating Ukraine has changed, calling for continued international pressure on the Kremlin. This rhetorical clash occurred just 2 days after President Trump signaled a tougher stance on Russia, which include praising Ukraine's war effort and supporting the idea that NATO allies should shoot down Russian jets that enter their airspace. The escalating rhetoric is set against a backdrop of heightened military alerts and direct confrontation. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte affirmed the alliance's readiness to defend its territory following consultations under Article 4 triggered by airspace violations. He stated that decisions to engage aircraft are made in real-time basis on the threat assessment, and that the Supreme Allied Commander Europe has the necessary authorities to act. This stance aligns with President Trump's recent comments endorsing a robust response to incursion. These developments follow a series of incidents, including a violation of Estonian airspace by 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets and the shooting down of Russian drones that entered Polish airspace, which Poland described as a deliberate violation. Meanwhile, Russia and Belarus conducted joint military exercise known as Zapad 2025, which includes simulated nuclear strikes and practiced the deployment of the Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile system, activities that have unnerved neighboring NATO countries. Amid the rising temperatures, diplomatic channels remain active. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov held a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Maria Zakharova, spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, described the talks as constructive and said they focus on addressing the root cause of the crisis in Ukraine, following up on the August summit between Trump and Putin in Alaska. This diplomatic engagement, however, exists alongside continued military posturing. The Zapad exercise observed this year by U.S. military officers involved training for urban combat and countering illegal armed groups, with Russian troops sharing lessons learned from the war in Ukraine. As European diplomats have privately warned Moscow that NATO is prepared to respond with force to further airspace violations. The situation presents a critical test for the alliance's unity and strategic resolve in the face of what it perceives as deliberate provocation. If you have made it this far, congratulations, you have unlocked the truth. I want to ask you a quick question. We see a clear fracture in NATO, with Hungary's Orban openly defining the alliance consensus on Russia, while simultaneously NATO is taking its most aggressive defensive posture ever by authorizing the shooting down of Russian jets. If NATO shoots down Russian jets, would that lead to World War III? Join the debate. We want to hear your insightful opinion on where this is all heading in our community. Share your analysis and opinion in the comments below. Like the video and most importantly, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.